Sequence counters. What are sequence counters? Sequence counters are unique numerical ID generators. What's that in English? A sequence is an object in Oracle that allows you to create a unique number. How would that be used? Typically they're used, as you have seen in all the schemas I've shown you, every single entity has its own unique ID, as in category ID, venue ID, etc. Typically with object applications such as those written in Java, they're object-oriented, they require unique IDs, not necessarily for the whole database structure, but for each entity in the database, for each object data type. What happens with relational databases with overlaid object applications, such as in Java, is every single entity has its own unique ID and we need to generate those numbers. A sequence is a very efficient way of doing it. It's much faster to use an internal Oracle sequence than it is to keep a table of unique ID numbers or use variables in memory and applications. There is not much chance of duplicating the IDs, so you're not going to get the two customers with the same ID number, unless of course you recycle the sequence, for instance, or you do something odd with the min and max values. That's unlikely. Generally a sequence is started at 1 or 0 and is incremented by 1. As far as we're concerned, anything else is out of scope. It's part of database administration. We don't need to worry about it for now. Before we go into some examples of sequences, just some strange behavior that should be explained. There are two pseudo columns which allow access to the value of sequences, current val and next val, accessed as sequence name.currentVal or sequence name.nextVal. Note that current val will not function in a session until or after the sequence next val has been issued. In other words, if you were to do select sequence.currentVal from dual, you get an error. If you do sequence.nextVal and then sequence.currentVal, everything will work fine. Now let's get to some examples of sequences. I'm not actually going to type any examples in, I'm just going to show you the use of sequences in the concepts schema creation script. First of all, this is where I created the sequences for the various IDs in my tables. There's my category, my act table, my show table, my venue table, my ticket table, and my price table. I said create sequence, sequence name, start with 1. In other words, start at the value 1, increment by 1, no max value, no cycle. That means it doesn't have a maximum. I don't recycle it. Recycling is when, say, you get to 1,000 and go back to 1. You could end up with duplicates that way. In this type of application where we're using it as a unique identifier for an entity, you don't want to recycle it. It's not a good idea. You will get problems eventually. So all it's doing is it's counting from 1 to infinity. Now let's go and look at something else. That's my sequences creation. How do I use sequences? First of all, let's find something where I used it as an insert, a simple insert. Insert into category, category ID and name, values, category sequence, next val. So that will generate a next value on the sequence. If the sequence is 10, it will go and set the sequence to 11 and return the value 11 into the category ID and store it in that row in the category table. Don't worry about insert commands, select commands or anything like that at this stage. We will get to those later on when we get onto DML. Let's go and have another look at some use of sequences in the show script. This is a little bit more complex. Now what's happening here is I'm inserting rows into the show table, but the columns in the show table come from other tables. They're foreign keys, if you remember. Category, act, and venue are all foreign keys on the show table. Obviously the show ID is generated with a unique sequence. Then the category ID is using a subquery, what's called a subquery select statement. Once again, don't worry about SQL for the moment. And I'm going into the category table, I'm finding the category ID where I know what my name is. I know that the category of this show is rock/popular, and the name of the person is that, and the name of the venue is that. And I add a date to it as well. So this is the primary key for the show table, and these are all foreign keys.